So we celebrate today the solemnity, the feast day of our patron, Blessed Cardinal John Henry Newman. This is the nearest Sunday to his feast day, and this morning, sadly you missed him, we had the Apostolic Nuncio here to celebrate the Mass. So it's been a real celebration of the chaplaincy, the beginning of the academic year, and as I say, of our patron, Cardinal Newman. Look, just a race through his life, really a few seconds, and then I just want to not tell you everything about him, but just pick up one or two themes from his life that have really struck me as I've got to know him better, and hopefully will inspire you, his Christian example to us. He is a local saint. His life spans the 19th century. He's a Londoner, and every time I walk to LSE from here, and I go past Holborn, just before Holborn Station, many of you know, there's a blue plaque on one of the side streets that says Cardinal Newman lived here. This is where his family lived in his growing up to, I can't remember, mid-teens or something, before his father, a banker, went bankrupt. So times were hard for the Newman family, but he is a Londoner, he grew up here. These are the streets that he walked. So yes, he's a patron for obvious reasons. He's a great intellectual, he was a university chaplain, but aren't we lucky to have someone who knew the London that we know as our patron, even though it's changed a little bit. He had no faith, not very much faith. Then he had a wonderful growing in faith and became a very devout evangelical, and that grew into a mature Anglican Christian faith that brought him to university very young, to Oxford. I'll come back to that. He eventually did well in his studies, lived his faith very deeply, stayed on as a teacher and academic in the Oxford college system, and then became university chaplain at the great university church in the centre of Oxford, where he was for many years, and then deepening his Christian faith, and really a crisis of where he belonged, his famous conversion from the Anglican Church to the Catholic Church, which took place in the village of Littlemore, just outside Oxford. He was received by Blessed Dominic Barbary, who was an Italian missionary who was well known in England at that time for reaching out to people, and especially to bringing people into full communion with the Catholic Church. Newman became a new Catholic, went to Rome, was ordained as a Catholic priest, and then began the next stage of his life, which involved so many different things, and I'll come back to some of them, but eventually becoming a priest of the Oratory. And many of you know the beautiful Oratory Church in South Kensington in London that Newman established and where he lived. He published much, he wrote, he was involved in lots of controversies. He set up a university in Ireland, he moved to Birmingham and set up the Oratory there, and he lived to a great age, involved at the end of his life simply in being a priest, in the pastoral love for the people of Birmingham in the parish of the Oratory there, and right at the end of his life receiving the red hat from the Pope and becoming a cardinal in recognition of all that he'd given to the Church over his long life, and all especially that he'd given for his Catholic faith. Not bad, hey? Newman's life in 2 minutes. Right, you can go and look it up. But instead of just plodding through the chronology of the 19th century, just one or two themes that really strike me personally, and I think would have some resonance for you as university students. First, Newman's search for truth. He loved the truth. He longed to know the truth. And especially in our age, with so much false news and so much ambiguity about whether there even is such a thing as truth and where we can find it, and all the pressures on us to opt out and cop out and live for the opinion of others or for what's going to make us successful or rich. Newman's heart and mind were focused on discovering the truth, and he followed it wherever it led him. It led him to Christianity, it led him to the Anglican Communion, it led him most famously to join the Catholic Church when he was at the peak of his career, intellectually and ecclesiastically as an Anglican, and all that he sacrificed at different stages for following the truth. When he became Catholic from Anglican, he lost everything. He lost friends, family, he lost his job, he lost his income, he lost his status, his reputation. You cannot imagine what it meant for a renowned member of the establishment church in the mid-19th century to become a Catholic. It was shame. Total shame. And as I said, everything he lost. And he was willing to risk that. He wasn't particularly happy about losing all this, but he was willing to lose it because he knew that the truth was the greatest treasure. And the truth as he understood it, we always see limited pictures, but the truth as he understood it was worth living and dying for. And that truth brought him to the fullness of the Catholic Church, and how much he gained from that, but also how much he gave up. So just let's seek the truth this academic year, yes? In our studies, in our conversations, and let's stand up for what we believe. It might be a tiny conversation, it might be a big battle, but if you decide simply always to tell the truth, I don't mean you have to splurge all the time everywhere, yes? We need some reticence and subtlety, but if you simply decide not to lie and to speak the truth as lovingly as you can in every situation, it makes life much harder and much, much simpler. Doesn't it? So, to live for the truth and to speak it. Secondly, Newman experienced profound failure. This great academic, many people have said, not just Catholics and Christians, the greatest intellectual of 19th century England, he in effect failed his finals at university. I can't remember exactly, he got a third or something. He was expected to be this star pupil, and he had a kind of nervous breakdown. He was so stressed about the studies and the pressure on him that he completely blew it. His life fell apart because everything had been loaded onto the idea that John Henry Newman is going to be this great student, and he lost it all. And the humility that taught him, and how hard it was for him to get up and get back on his horse, as the Americans would say, and say, it hasn't gone as I wanted, I'm not the person I thought I was, but let me try to do as well as I can in these circumstances. And yes, he did succeed, and he did become a great intellectual and a great teacher, but he had that experience of failure, and it marked him. So when we have these experiences, and I'm sure you've had them, I don't wish them upon you, but you will have, how much we can learn from his example. To grow in humility, to maybe to pop our pride a little bit and make us lean on God and our friends, and help us to step up a little bit more humbly and do the best we can and leave the rest to God. There were other examples. His sickness when he was in Italy, the difficulties he faced trying to set up the Catholic University in Ireland, lots of projects that despite his fame and success did not go well. But we have to be, well, this is a kind of business thing, isn't it? We have to be willing to fail, and to fail big, and then we might do some wonderful things, but to learn that lesson. And that leads me to the next point. He was able to take on great big projects and also very little humble hidden projects. And I think that's a lesson for us. He set up the oratory in England. He built this magnificent churches, a new, in effect, a new way of living priesthood and community life in this country. He set up a new university. He set up publishing projects. He was a man of great enterprise. He was well, we use this language. He was a start-up guy. He was an entrepreneur, in effect, in the world of the 19th century. So yes, let's do something big. Let's do something big for others and big for the Lord. Please think big. I'm going on about humility, but don't limit your horizons. Let's do some big, bold things for the Lord, and not just when you're rich and famous, but now. Okay, but he was also a man of great humility. His patron saint was St. Philip Neri, who just loved the people around him, the streets, the people in the streets, the people in his parish. And there were tens of thousands of people at Cardinal Newman's funeral in Oxford, in Birmingham. Why? Because he spent those later years of his life visiting the sick, visiting the poor, hearing confessions in his church, just being a forgotten, humble priest. Big projects, great humility in serving the humble and the poor. Isn't that a great model for us? Another theme, well, it's actually his motto. Cardinal Newman's motto, which he stole very happily from Francis de Sales, is "Heart speaks to heart." Heart speaks to heart. The theme of friendship in Cardinal Newman. That it's not just about projects and systems. It's not even about truth, where I started. Sorry, it is about truth, I take that back. But it's not just about truth. It's about speaking the truth in love. Loving truthfully. Loving the person. Heart to heart, face to face, one soul to one soul, person to person. You see this in so many ways. You know the famous tutorial system in Oxford. It's falling apart a little bit because they don't have the human power to have all these one-to-one supervisions and tutorials that they had. Well, Newman invented the tutorial system. The idea that you'd go to university and your education would be a profound conversation with your tutor, your supervisor. And in that conversation and that intellectual wrestling and that friendship and that support and that mentoring, you would grow in the love of that friendship. And that it's not just friendship versus truth. Truth grows in the context of friendship. This is the Oxford tutorial system. It's what I grew up with in Cambridge when I did my undergraduate there. It's what some of you are privileged to experience in your universities. But honestly, not many of you are having one-to-one supervisions with your tutors or lecturers, are you? It's a gift. And to find ways of having that. But it was in his academic projects. It was in his love for his friends. Literally friendship. It was in the idea of the oratory community. The oratory priests are not a religious order. They're not monks. They are secular priests. Like myself, I'm a secular priest, who live together in community with only the bond of friendship to unite them. They don't make vows to each other or to the community. It's really interesting. And in theory, they can walk away at any time, because it's the bond of friendship that holds them together. Isn't that beautiful? And for us to aspire to that, wouldn't it be good for us to have the same friendship and love with the people that we meet? True friends, but an openness of heart to all the people that we meet, whether we would call them instinctively friends or not. This is Newman's motto. Heart speaks to heart. And it's the secret, actually, of so much of his life. And just to end on an intellectual theme that comes out of his writing, or two kind of tied together, Newman's whole search was for a holistic vision of truth. It was the 19th century. All the gains, the Enlightenment gains in logic and science and maths and the natural sciences, it was an immense intellectual enterprise. And Newman rejoiced in this, but he wanted to hold together the holistic, life-giving vision of faith and friendship and the human with the intellectual and the scientific and the logical. And they were in danger of splitting apart. And some people would say that danger is equally great today, isn't it? The compartmentalization. Either I'm being very logical, or I'm being very emotional, or it's faith versus science, or it's romance versus reason. Newman wanted to have a holistic human vision of truth and love that allowed us to unite these things. that one of his famous phrases is the illative sense. The illative sense, don't worry about the jargon, but it's how we can come to understand something in its truth and in its wholeness from many different angles. We see truths and reasons converging and connecting so that we have a holistic picture. We see different pieces of the jigsaw puzzle put together, and there is a wisdom and a truth and an enlightenment that we can only see when we see the whole, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. The illative sense, but a simpler way of remembering it, is just a holistic understanding. And I leave you with that thought because I think it unites everything I've said. Newman was a great man, a great intellectual, a great preacher, teacher, friend. He was a great Christian thinker. And part of this is your vocation as students at university who have faith. It's to keep this whole vision of what it means to love your faith, to love your studies, to love your relationships and your friendships, and to see that it's possible to hold them together because they form one single beautiful truth. The truth of what it is to be human, the truth of our universe, the truth of Christ, the truth of the Catholic faith. Newman saw that you can hold this together, and in its organic unity, its holistic understanding, it gives a truth that's far more beautiful and truthful and meaningful than any of the individual pieces on their own. This is what we're called to. What a great patron we have for our chaplaincy, and individually what a great friend and patron and mentor we have in our faith.